Very good morning, friends. So I hope you're all safe and healthy. In continuation of the ECL model, what we've been discussing with respect to Index 109, I'm now going to take you to what we technically call a bucket approach. But we call this as a credit risk assessment, but technically it's more like a bucket approach where we look into the fact that if there has been a significant change in the credit risk since the initial recognition, then do we apply a 12 months ECL or do we apply a lifetime ECL? Now, how would this bucket approach, make any difference? If you're switching over, let's say from a 12 months ECL to a lifetime ECL or vice versa, how would that impact my accounting? This is what I want to look at today. Let's find this out in detail. जो बच्चे अपने नवंबर 21 की तैयारी कर रहे हैं उनके लिए अच्छी खबर ये है, सीए फाइनल ग्रुप 1 के सभी सब्जेक्ट्स के लिए आ रहा है अभ्यास बैच। और मज़ेदार बात यह है कि इसके अंदर आपको चारों सब्जेक्ट सीए फाइनल ग्रुप 1 के कवर होंगे, जिनके अंदर आपको सिर्फ 3 महीने की एक सब्सक्रिप्शन चाहिए और आपके इसमें चारों सब्जेक्ट्स कवर होंगे और इस पर आप 10% डिस्काउंट भी अवेल कर सकते हैं। आपने कोड इस्तेमाल करना है CAKB10 और आपको 10% इमीडिएट डिस्काउंट मिल जाएगा। इसके अंदर सीए फाइनल ग्रुप 1 के अंदर चारों सब्जेक्ट्स में लॉ ले रहे हैं अमित पोपली सर, मैं ले रहा हूं फाइनेंशियल रिपोर्टिंग, ऑडिट ले रही हैं खुशबू सांघवी मैम और एसएफएम ले रहे हैं राहुल मलकान सर। तो सभी बैचेस के अंदर आप लाइव क्लासेस अटेंड कर सकते हैं। अगर क्लास मिस हो जाती है तो रिकॉर्डेड क्लासेस का फीचर अवेलेबल है जिस पर आपके अनलिमिटेड व्यूज है। टाइमिंग्स में कोई क्लैश नहीं है, तो इन 3 मंथ्स के अंदर अंदर नवंबर 21 की आप अपनी तैयारी को खूब मजबूत कर सकते हैं। तो इसका बैच का डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में आपको लिंक मिलेगा और इसके लिए 3 मंथ्स की आपकी सब्सक्रिप्शन इनफ है, जिसके लिए मैंने कोड आपको पहले बता दिया CAKB10, आपको 10% डिस्काउंट मिल जाएगा। तो आइए लेट्स क्रैक इट। Well, first of all, we must understand that an entity has to determine for all the credit risk exposures, we need to make an assessment whether there is a significant increase in the credit risk since initial recognition. Let me remind you that when I am looking at this assessment, of course, I'm making a mention of those financial assets where we are applying a general approach. Because we don't need a credit risk assessment, when we are applying a simplified approach to the financial assets. So typically when I'm saying that we need to make an assessment of the, significant increase in the credit risk, it is only when we are applying a general approach and we want to zero down on the fact that do we apply a 12 months or a lifetime ECL. Now this, comparison is to be done, you can say, from the initial recognition. So when you recognize the financial instruments, so we need to see, sitting on the balance sheet date, whether there has been a significant increase in the credit risk or not. And in this particular case, we can follow simple 2 principle. If the credit risk has not increased significantly, then you can measure your impairment loss using a 12 months ECL. We've said that a couple of times earlier as well. But if the credit risk has significantly increased, then we need to measure the impairment loss using a lifetime ECL. But today, the objective is more to tell you, that what is the impact in terms of, using, identifying that there is a significant increase in the credit risk or not. Now, as I said, there is a bucket approach. Now, you may call it as a bucket approach or you may call it as a stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. Look at the bucket number 1, that is stage 1. Look at the bucket number 2 and the bucket number 3, which is the stage 3. Now, once you see that there is a significant increase in the credit risk, you will move from stage number 1 to stage number 2. Now, what is the implication of moving from a stage number 1 to stage number 2? Implication number 1. We were using a 12 months ECL if we are in a stage 1, but then if you move to a stage number 2, then you're using a lifetime ECL. Now, this movement, can also take place like this. let's say at the end of first year, you applied a 12 months ECL, and let's say in the next year, you switch over to a lifetime ECL. Maybe in the third year, you switch back from the lifetime ECL back to the 12 months ECL. So you mean to say that we're going to make a assessment of the change in the credit risk, and it could be increase or a decrease? Yes. So that means that the movement from a stage 1 to stage 2, or a movement from a stage 2 to stage 1 is possible. That if there is an increase, you move to the stage 2, and if there is a decrease, you move to the stage number 1. So the implication is that you would look into the possible defaults for a lifetime of the instrument, or you look at the possible default in terms of only 12 months from the reporting date. But as far as the interest recognition is concerned, the computation of the interest income on that financial asset is measured based on the gross carrying amount itself. That means we will not reduce the amount of impairment loss in terms of calculating the interest, the finance income on that financial asset. So then what about the stage number 3? Now stage number 3 is something which is again a lifetime ECL approach, but this is a situation, where there has been a significant increase in terms of credit risk, where we say that, it has practically become credit impaired. So when you say that the financial asset has become credit impaired, it is a switch over from a stage 1 directly to stage 3, or from a stage 2 to stage number 3. So that means whether you move from stage 2 to stage 3, you're both under lifetime ECL. But then what is the accounting implication? Now, once you're in stage number 3, it is indicated that the financial asset is completely credit impaired. So this will have implications in terms of, accounting for the finance income. The finance income in this particular case is going to be computed on the net carrying amount, which means that you would consider the carrying amount of the financial asset, and then you're going to make a reduction of the impairment loss, and whatever is the net carrying amount, that would become the basis of calculating the finance income. So which means even the finance income will go down. So the identification of the changes in the credit risk from the initial recognition of the financial instrument is a very important element in terms of deciding, number one, that are you applying a 12 months or you're applying a lifetime ECL, and number two, you're also identifying that how do you recognize the interest income? Do you take it on the gross carrying amount, or do you take it on the net carrying amount? So when you're in stage 1 and 2, you're always calculating a finance income based on the gross carrying amount. It's only when you're in stage number 3, when it is credit impaired, then you're recognizing the finance income which is based on the net carrying amount. That's the accounting implications. So in the next video, we'll also take up a practical approach. How do we actually identify the change in the credit risk? So we'll talk about that in the next video. That's all for this particular video. Thank you, take care, and goodbye.